friends! Welcome to Changing Tracks. How are we today? Great! Well, we're going to get on board this train and get to know Brother Isaiah. He's going to tell us a little about his vocation, and let's see if he has had a change of tracks, but at least for now, how he found his vocation. How are you, Brother Isaiah? How's it going?
Good to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about your childhood, your youth.
Yeah, my name's Brother Isaiah Marie. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area in California. I'm with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. We're a small Franciscan community based out of New York, and I've been in the community about 7 years.
Were you always Catholic? Did you always consider yourself Catholic?
It was a beautiful childhood. I was actually baptized Episcopalian, and in grammar school my family converted and entered the Catholic Church. I grew up by the ocean, which was a huge blessing, and probably my first experience of God and first experience of awe and wonder was probably there. But it was a good childhood, a lot of love from Mom and Dad, and just near the beauty of the Lord's creation and near the water. That was probably the biggest blessing. Yeah.
During this time, were you always in contact with the Lord? Always under His protection?
Yeah, I'd say the first encounter I probably had with the Lord was near the ocean. Just there was this sense of awe and majesty, and just this wonder and beauty of what He had created. And I'm not sure, my prayer life was somewhat distant. I'd say I knew He was out there. I didn't really know who He was in the younger years, but I knew He was good because He had created the sea and everything in it, and that just blew me away. So I just remember thinking, the God who created this is good, and because this is good and this is beautiful. So it was simple in the younger years, but it was really an experience of knowing God, I think, through His beauty. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about your family, if they helped you in your education in the faith, or if they just went to Mass on Sundays? What was your education like at home in regards to the Catholic faith?
My parents were beautiful people. I think that they encouraged me, especially just by their own love for one another and their perseverance. I think we were all kind of growing together in our faith life since we entered the church at the same time. So it was step by step, and we were sort of learning as we were going. God put a lot of good people and role models in my life, and got to know the Lord in a more personal way through high school. And there was definitely a desire to serve Him, to grow in a relationship, but there was also just a lot of different battles in my own heart. And for the most part, I think through high school it was really about my desire to do something for the Lord, and maybe not so much an awareness of what the Lord had done for me, what He had given me, but a lot of blessings. The Lord put people in my life who gave me a lot of good role models of who Christ was and what it meant to live for Him. And then in college, I'd say I had the experience that really brought together all these blessings and the challenges I'd experienced in my life growing up. And it was just at a time when I thought I pretty much had everything I wanted. I was playing a sport and studying the things I wanted to study with the people I wanted to be with, and I just felt this emptiness, maybe a loneliness, this deep interior sense of just desiring more and a lack of satisfaction. I thought I knew God. I think I did know Him, but I hadn't really cried from the gut before to Him. I hadn't really known my need for Him. I knew He was a good God, but I didn't know just how much my heart was made for Him. And so in college, after a sports injury at one point, I just found myself really crying out for more peace, more satisfaction out of life, wondering which way to go. And I guess from that gut prayer, the Lord really entered in just beautiful and simple ways. I just remember on the way to school, to college, to classes, there was a chapel, and I used to just kind of stop in there. A priest had mentioned just take a stop in and don't do anything, just go in, just be there. And I'd go in, and I just remember feeling this deep welcome the more I went. There was just this welcoming presence, and I couldn't say what it was, but it was feeding this emptiness. It was feeding this loneliness. It was feeding this ache that was in my heart that nothing could satisfy. All these good things that I had been given, but nothing could fully satisfy it. And so I would go and I would just sit there in this presence and in these arms, and this welcome just brought my heart to life. I'd say I just awakened everything in me, everything that I'd ever loved, from the ocean to sports to school, all these things. I found the source of that welcome and that joy in this mysterious presence, in this fatherly presence. And so eventually I started to let my guard down and just let those arms, I think, love me. And I'd say it was really the caress of the Lord's mercy that touched my heart and really awakened in me this next step in healing. And again, I had been practicing my faith for years, but I just remember in that experience of His mercy, it was as if I had just begun. I had just gotten started, and from that point, I started to let go of a lot of my plans and the things I had pictured myself doing for the Lord and for other people, and then I started to let Him sort of provide a plan for my life, and things got better, not without its challenges, but there was more peace, more satisfaction. Life got simpler. There was more contentment, and I started to ask Him, okay, like, what do you have for me? I'm kind of done with these plans. They're not as good. The peace isn't as real as it is with you. So, what are your plans? And that's what eventually led me to start seeking the possibility of a religious vocation as a consecrated man.
Okay, so right now, a ton of young people are watching. What were the plans that you left behind? Or what would you say to them so as to leave the plans that they have now that maybe aren't going to do them any good? Not just for consecrated life, but just so as to follow Jesus. What would you say to these young people?
Yeah. In high school, I remember feeling this real desire and burning hope that I was made for something great. And I think that was real, and I think that's in the heart of all young people. When we're honest with ourselves, we feel in our hearts that we're made for something. We're made for something more. We're made for something great. And I believe that. I think the problem is I wrote a little bit too much of the story of what that would look like. I thought maybe I'd be a teacher. I thought about playing sports professionally, all good things. But they were really my ideas and not the Lord's ideas. But the desire to be something great was real, and that was from Him. He put that restlessness in my heart, and I think He puts it in the hearts. And young people are more aware of it than anybody else, and that's the beauty of youth, is that you know that you're made for something. So I would just say to be real and to be honest and to accept that gift of your call to something more and to something great, but to surrender what that's supposed to look like. Don't write ahead, just get in touch with the Lord. Start talking to Him on a daily basis. Give Him your hopes, give Him your plans, talk to Him about your cares. Sometimes I think we think our prayer life is talking about the things we're not interested in with the Lord, but I think He wants to talk to us about the stuff that we love, the things that delight us. He's the one who gives us everything we delight in, and He loves to see us delight in it. So just to give Him the things that, come up from your gut, not the things that are just in your mind, but the things that weigh on you, the things that make your heart leap. Talk to Him about those things, because I think those are signposts that He's going to use to lead you where He wants you. So you are called to something great. That desire is from Him. Let Him show you what that's supposed to look like. That would be my word. And we do that in prayer. We do that in contact with Him. Experience of His mercy is where we find who we really are again and again. The sacraments, the church, the poor, He hides in those places, waiting to touch us, waiting to speak to us. So I'd say seek, just go find Him. Be real to the restlessness in your heart that cries out for Him, and go look for Him. Yeah.
From what moment did you know that Jesus was calling you? And how did that come about? I mean, was it really clear to you that it was with the Franciscans? How did you meet them?
Yeah, so then after I had this experience, I guess, of his mercy, just this embrace, this tender love that he had for me, I was like, okay, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? And I just remember like Googling things and the communities and interests, and I realized there's probably more than I could count and more than I could visit, so I didn't know where to start. So I guess I started with what was in front of me. I started asking priests, I started asking married men about their experience, I started looking, asking God, like, what do you want? What do you want? But I think looking back, what he was using was my desires. He doesn't call us to something that we have no idea what it is and have no possible interest in it. He calls us through our desires and through the things that we love. And so I just started looking around and visiting. It's sort of like, it's a really awesome, somewhat like a dating experience, but you dating communities. It's kind of a wild thing. You're visiting, you're finding out more, you're asking, you're seeing what sits in your heart. And I'm looking around, but ultimately he was calling me to things that he'd already put in my heart, desires and loves. And I remember I wanted to be close to the poor. Whenever I was close to the poor, I felt this peace of his presence. I wanted a life with brothers in community. I just played with sports teams, and that was always this joy, this accountability and strength that came from that. And I wanted a life of prayer. I just always remember the peace and the quiet that I found, and I wanted that to be a regular part of my life, and I knew that's where the life came from, was from prayer. So just started looking, but ultimately it found me, he found me, and he brought the community to me. It wasn't the other way around. Somebody recommended this Franciscan community. I read the life of St. Francis, and in the life of St. Francis, I just found everything that I always wanted, that I thought was too good to be true, was this man's life. He lived simply for Christ. He belonged to him. He lived with the poor. He lived a life of prayer, and he lived a life as a brother to the world. And all of that just cried out in my heart. But then there's a million Franciscan communities, so I'm like, okay, where do I go from here? And we just have to allow ourselves to be led, because it's not like he's trying to hide it from us. And we just need to let him lead. And so he brought me to this little community in the Bronx, in a city I said I'd never live in. And I remember just visiting, and the joy and the simplicity and the presence of God was just this peace that sat in my heart. And I remember looking out these windows in the Bronx over the projects and thinking, I don't know why, but I just feel totally at home. And I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't expecting this to be it, but my heart said home. And that's how the Lord really spoke it to me. And that's how I knew the community. It was just, this is the one. It's something like, I think married people say, you know she was the one because you were made for her. Everything in your heart said yes. This is home, and that's what my heart said. The Lord spoke, yeah.
Okay, so rewinding a little, when you started to realize that you had a vocation, were there people, anybody, some reading, something that helped you to clarify your vocation?
So yeah, just to go back to this one particular experience in college, just really experiencing the welcome of God in His church. I think growing up, church wasn't really a very attractive idea. I knew good people in the church, but going to church wasn't necessarily something I was super attracted to. I thought of it more in terms of what music sounded like, how excited I was to be there. But I found church was really the home where God was, where he was dwelling, where His presence was. And so when I started to just make these little visits to the chapel that was on our campus, when I started to go to the sacraments regularly, like Mass and confession, when I started to go to Eucharistic adoration, what I was experiencing was the place where God was. It wasn't the church just as people I knew or music that was played at Mass, but it was this presence of God. And sometimes it was exciting and sometimes it wasn't, but it was His presence that was touching me there. And I also remember just the importance of people in my life at that time. I was sort of afraid to talk about this new desire I had, I guess, to to give my life to Him, but God put people in my life, and we can ask for that sometimes when we feel alone or we have no support. God sent people into my life, and that was such an important part of the journey, was the support of people who were also seeking the Lord and stumbling along, but doing their best to try to reach out and find what His plan was for their life. So people came into my life, brothers and sisters who could support me and encourage me and help me. I needed guidance. I didn't really know where I was going from there. I didn't know what this whole call was supposed to look like, and God sent people. So to ask God, like if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling like I have no support, I don't know who to talk to, God, send them into my life. I think sometimes we rely on ourselves so much. We say, God, you have the big plan, and I'll take care of everything else, but He wants to take care of everything. He's a Father, and He just wants us to be children. And then I also remember just not being able to break some of the habits that I had. There were some sins, some vices that I just felt powerless. I felt like, I know what the right thing to do is, but I just can't do it. And I can't seem to really let go of the life that I was living that I knew needed to change. Just habits that you build up, ways that are just kind of opposed to God and opposed to His peace. And I didn't know it, but my gut was saying, God, help me. And that's a beautiful prayer. Just, God, help me. We don't need to get too much more complicated than that. Keep prayer simple, just, God, help me, and pray from here, not from here, but from here. And God answered that prayer. I remember I was given a trip to Lourdes, France, and I went there, and He did help me. He sent His mother, who was a human like us, and who knew the battles that we faced, and has a mother's love for us. And I just remember being there for 2 weeks. It wasn't one experience in particular. Again, I was with the poor, where God is always. But I remember leaving and just feeling this freedom that God released me from a lot of the habits I'd had. The battle's not over after that, but God can release us from the craziest things, especially the places where we feel that bondage. But I think the important thing is to cry from the gut. The prayer of the lowly heart pierces the clouds. So when we pray from here, God hears always, 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 and He's swift to answer. So it was those prayers from the gut that I found God's answers came most quickly to. And He sent people, He sent friends, He sent a mother, and He sent the light I needed to take the next step. Yeah.
Who is Our Lady for you?
Yeah, since Lourdes, France, I'd say from that experience on, Mary's always been a part of my life, a real humble companion and a mother, really, and a woman for my heart, I would say. You don't enter religious life because you don't want married life. You enter it because you feel like God's calling you to a deeper marriage. And so, in some ways, Mary becomes a woman in a pure way. The woman of your life and the mother of your heart. And I'd say the two things that she is in my life is tenderness and beauty. First, she's tenderness. She's just this beautiful example of motherhood. So it's always a tender arm. And I think God expresses His own tenderness through her. Just these arms that are always ready to listen and to welcome, always ready to console. They're always there. They're humble arms, and she's this creature that God wanted to use to express His tenderness, the tenderness of His heart. So she's always been that for me, a place where I can always go to ask, help me return to the Father, help me return to the Lord and to His mercy, even when I struggle to believe it, help me to find it again. So she's encouraging in that tenderness. The second thing is beauty. I think she is this masterpiece of the Lord's creation. She's like the artwork, His masterpiece, His beautiful artwork. And beauty is nourishing to the heart. When we see beautiful things, when we see sunsets or artwork, our heart gets refreshed. And it reminds us of what we were made for, that beauty and that strength that God wants to express through us. And so I look to her just to refresh my heart in that beauty, because He's created us for these things, and she's somewhat of the masterpiece of His hands. So just look to her to be beauty and tenderness. Sometimes life can be ugly and be pretty rough, and we need beauty. We need tenderness to refresh and to awaken our hearts, especially when scar tissue builds up from whatever our experiences, whatever our wounds. We need beauty and tenderness to refresh it, to create in us a new heart, a heart able to continue following the Lord and seeking Him and seeking His plan for our lives. So she's been the mother, I'd say she's the mother of my life and the woman of my heart, and a signpost at the end of the day. She just points to Jesus. She just points to the Lord. She just points to the source of life. She's a good mother that way. So yeah, it's I can't go a day without her help and her pointing the way back to the source, to the life, to Christ. Yeah.
And now what, brother? What's your role in the community? What do you do as Franciscans?
So as Franciscans, our main work is with the materially poor, and the second task is evangelization. And it's always been very much tied into my vocation, but I think it's also essential. You know, the Lord creates each of us for a mission, and as we act on that mission, we discover more deeply who He is and who He's created us to be and who we are in His eyes. So I don't think, you know, our mission and our understanding of the Lord can be separated. Both build on one another. So particularly our work with the poor, it's been, I think, a source of life, deep life for my own heart and for my own life of prayer. You know, the poor, that's where Christ came from the moment in Bethlehem, but throughout salvation history, it was the poor, the lowly, the brokenhearted, the orphan, and the widow that God just runs to. Theirs is the kingdom. So I think drawing near to the poor is pretty essential for our Christian life. That's where God hides Himself. That's what He shows us in the Eucharist, that he comes to us poor, He comes to us in the broken, He comes to us in the frustrating and the annoying and in the poverty of our own hearts. But when we draw near the poor, I think the Lord especially honors that, because that's where He makes Himself known. He could have come anyway, but He came poor, He came lowly, He came helpless, and He wants to say something to our hearts, and He wants to say something to our world because of that. You know, so just to draw near the poor, that might look like you know, the poor in your own home and your families, might look like the poor at school, in the workplace, but to draw near the poor and to not have to come with solutions, not come with the answer, but to come with a heart open to His presence, I think is essential, you know. And the first work is always prayer, and prayer should lead us to the poor. And our second work is evangelization, and that can look like any number of things, but ultimately it's just sharing the joy of the gospel. Sometimes we do that with our lips, sometimes we do it with our lives, but at the end of the day, it's sharing the joy that we know comes from knowing Jesus. And it's just sharing the simple joy of how God makes life better, how God makes this day better. And that's, again, our mission for Franciscans. That's our personal call, but in some ways that's a call of every Christian, is to share the joy of the gospel, to draw near to God in prayer and in the poor, that He sends us.
Brother Isaiah, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, and may the Lord continue blessing not only your community, but...
Yeah, thank you, Christina. God bless you, and God bless all of you who see this. The Lord loves you very much, and know that there are people praying for you and people who love you. God bless you with His peace. Amen.
Thank you so much. Friends, it's not necessary to go far away. As He said, surely inside of us, in our work, our school, university, in our parish, in our community as well. Surely there are poor people, but not just poor in material things, which is a little of what they dedicate themselves to, but a poor person in spirit, a poor person who still hasn't met the Lord. So it's our mission to present Him to them, evangelize. make yourself a portable evangelizing machine. Well, we'll leave it at that until the next time on Changing Tracks. Thanks.